Hello and welcome to Dean Street Stories. This is our series where we talk to the artists, producers, creators behind some of the incredible records that you've heard and the next voices that are coming out. So this is where we'll really get into the stories behind the music, the inspiration behind what made them, and also the journeys that people have taken to get where they are today. So without further ado, let's get into it. So today I'm joined by Simon Saywood from Analoguetube, and we're going to be talking about craft, history, and just generally life at Dean Street. So I mean, we know, of course, a little bit more about you, but if you don't mind, Simon, just kind of jumping into
Sure.
kind of who you are, what you do at Dean Street, and Analoguetube.
Okay, so I arrived here in 2019, actually. But my whole sort of journey really goes back to about 1986 when I kind of arrived in this industry. But my real thing, sort of the thing that I'm sort of doing now and have done for the last 17 years, sort of really started back in 1983, I think. So I worked for a manufacturing company. I made production line equipment for the educational industry. So things like galvanometers, pH meters, all kinds of electronics for the educational industry for universities and schools. I was quite really sort of desperate to sort of get a job in London. And, you know, like all kind of young people, I suppose, at that sort of time in their life, you know, who doesn't like music, you know? And I was really, really sort of interested about the technical side of music and actually supporting it. So I wrote off hundreds of letters because there was obviously no internet at that stage. And I ended up working for a rental company, a music rental company in Willesden. And as I later found out, really, I suppose the rental company was set up in part to service the studios at Battery Studios. So all the tape machines, all the guitars, the drums, the bits of outboard gear and everything else that was rented sort of as a separate company, actually, to Battery Studios. And I was there for, I suppose, about 7 or 8 years, something like that. And then I left there and then joined HHB for 18 months, which was great, as a sort of a technical manager for their service department. So I left HHB actually and took a break for a month or so, and I was living in South London at the time. But then I got this job at so I started working for Metropolis Studios in '97. So we were looking after consoles, we were looking after tape machines and all the outboard gear and microphones and all the other bits and pieces that the studio has. And it's a massive, massive studio. And so there was a lot to do. We were on a kind of a crew of about sort of 4 people in those days. We were sort of rostering around the clock, looking at when bands could afford to sort of pay for studio time at the rate that they were doing it at that time, which meant that the studios were booked 24 hours a day. And there was a technical staff needed to look after the tape machines and the consoles, big, large format SSL consoles, Neve consoles as well. And it just had to be done that way. So, but over the years, obviously, you know, the technology's changed. I was there for 23 years. So that was a massive change in technology just in the time that I was there. So, you know, we went from analog to digital, and then from digital to kind of back to analog again, if you disregard computers. So, you know, people were obviously, you know, recording into computers and using A to D and D to A converters.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to keep the old digital tape machines because they were no use to anybody. People couldn't get the tape anymore to record on, so they used standard 2-inch, half-inch, quarter-inch tape machines. So they've kind of really stood the test of time, and people kind of record through tape machines as well. So rather than present a mastering engineer, with a quarter-inch reel of tape or a half-inch reel of tape, sometimes they do. They would give them, a sort of a finished piece that would be, recorded onto a computer.
Yeah.
But that was recorded through tape. Through tape.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Because I was just thinking in terms of essentially
a drive,
the consumer side of things. Through that period, you'd be going from tapes, because I remember the first tape that I bought was around that time.
Yeah.
So tape to then essentially CD.
Yes.
To then MP3 with streaming, and kind of tail end of that would be
magneto-optical. And all that kind of
all of that fun stuff. Yeah. So it's quite fun that like kind of you are having a similar experience on the production side, but actually there is then that resurgence of kind of tape. So when we're saying the 2-inch tape, is that like reel to reel?
So that would be an open reel tape machine on a 10.5-inch spool. And that would give you sort of 15 minutes of reel or something like that, depending on what speed you're, running at. And it's nice to see that.
So why do you feel like people have gone back to recording through tape, even though the end medium is going to be digital?
I think much for the same reason that people like, valve gear. It's this sort of randomness, if I can say that, of the sound, the energy within the music. It's very non-linear. So, what the sort of brilliance of digital gear is that it gives you, 100% all of the time, 24 hours a day. But tube gear, and in particular tube gear, but some early sort of discrete solid state electronics, is kind of, is it there? Is it not there? We're not quite sure, but we'll go with it anyway. And because it adds energy in it, and it adds something to your music that a plugin can't necessarily provide. Because obviously you switch, you run a plugin and it's going to be the same as it was yesterday, and for the next ad infinitum forever. There is a certain sort of X about this type of gear that brings something to the party, which is really good.
So you've been at so many kind of famous studios kind of across the years, and worked with so many different technologies. Are there any kind of interesting people or projects or kind of ways that you've worked with people that kind of have stood out over the years?
Michael Jackson.
I mean, the most interesting of them all.
I mean, I couldn't let that one go.
Yeah.
It was a massive event in my life, even though I had nothing to do with it. Well, I did in terms of supporting the studio, but it was an extraordinary. I'll call it an event, actually, an unmissable event, and an extraordinary time for the studio, which is Metropolis Studios, actually, because he was. Forget now whether he was doing a show in London or whether he was just simply recording at Metropolis. I can't remember. But wherever he went, it was followed by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people wherever he went. And in this case, it was Chiswick. So you'd get a kind of an ear in the morning about what time he was going to turn up, but then you'd see all of the people. I don't know if you've ever been to Metropolis Studios, but there's a sort of a little driveway from Chiswick High Road, and they'd all appear with their face masks on, Michael Jackson masks on, standing at the end of the drive at about sort of 10 o'clock in the morning. And you think, he's not quite left the Dorchester yet, but he will be here soon. And there would be a whole cavalcade of cars that would turn up with one guy right in the middle. And Metropolis has quite an interesting car park in the basement, with a kind of a roller shutter gate sort of type arrangement to get in, and it was it was it was quite an extraordinary thing actually. When he turned up, he was at Metropolis, I think, for like a week, something like that. And so this was when he was recording on the 2C's record label, I think.
Right. Yeah.
So, so the engineers there were John Barnes was one of them. Matt Tate was another engineer. I think John Barnes was maybe a producer or something like that. And there was another guy whose name I forget. But they were all hauled up in Studio B. And when Michael Jackson arrived, he had to be carried in horizontally through the car park and into the studio kind of environment, because they couldn't get him in standing upright because people were just like pushing so much.
Oh my God! So like crowd surfing almost to get him in. My God!
It was quite incredible actually. It was quite a spectacle, and the car park's not just for Metropolis. There's a whole kind of residence thing going on upstairs. So some of their cars were parked in there. So I remember by the exit of, or the entrance to the studio, there was a sort of a drop head Mercedes. With a kind of with like a sort of soft top roof, or one I think you could actually remove. I don't think it was like velvet or anything, but it was definitely not to be stood on. And Michael Jackson did this incredible sort of piece of acrobatics and jumped from the back of the car onto the roof and was just standing in front of his adoring fans. It was extraordinary. It was just like an absolute moment, you know. It was like, oh my goodness me, how incredible is this? And I remember filming it on I had a little Nikon little camera at the time, and I thought, this is just like, I didn't know what this meant, you know, but I was just taking pictures of it and filming it and stuff. I then subsequently lost the film because my hard drive died, which was probably oh dear, it was it wasn't great, but it certainly a memory, an absolute memory, and that's never to be repeated.
I mean, that's so cool to kind of to be able to see kind of a showman in action, kind of interacting with the fans and that kind of thing. Because it's so much said now where it's like what I'm amazed by is that's all happening pre kind of social media. So they're able to kind of find out where he is and track him down with, I guess, a phone tree. Maybe I'm going back a bit too far. But like, I think that's amazing that someone's going to be a spotter and go, he's here, and then they all kind of appear.
I mean, it was really something for somebody to have that much clout, you know, to be sort of followed by this number of people, you know, across the world. It was just like extraordinary.
So that kind of takes us to Metropolis. Then kind of post Metropolis, kind of. I don't think we've got into that quite yet. So what was the next step?
I left in 2019, I think, and my company was started, Analoguetube was started in 2008. But there was a whole lot of development that went on from 2002. So I had like 2 years to prepare the business and prepare my product for a show in 2008. And that was at the AES show in San Francisco. And so the product was developed based around Metropolis's Fairchild, which had been sitting idle down the end of the corridor somewhere, propping a door open or something, and it hadn't worked for years. And I sort of thought, well, you know, what am I going to be doing for the rest of my life, you know? And I sort of went full circle a bit, really, back to the days of when I was working in Cambridge, back to manufacturing, back to that kind of industrial sort of end of things, because that's sort of what I kind of knew best, really. So I redeveloped their Fairchild into a sort of a working unit, and made a copy unit alongside it in the sort of 6 years that I before I started Analoguetube in 2008.
Can I just ask, was this a 660 or a
670.
670? Okay.
So it was a stereo. It was a stereo unit, and much of that unit had been sort of taken away over the years. People had taken stuff out of it. Transformers had been gone missing, and so on. So I had to sort of redevelop it. I think the term is reverse engineer it from pretty much from the ground up, actually. So I spent many years redeveloping it, and took my redeveloped unit to the show in 2008. Now, I had no expectations of how that was going to go. I'd spent an absolute fortune on it by this stage. I had one working unit, which was tested in Studio E, and when I built this thing, and I thought I've got to switch it on, it was a kind of like, is this going to work? Is it going to sound like the original? I had no idea, because even though I had a working unit, that had bits missing from it that had to be redeveloped. So I was kind of, I suppose at the end of the day, does it sound good? And that was my only sort of guide, really. Does it sound okay? Would people use it? So I took this thing to the show. There were also other parts of it that I had to get remade from tube manufacturers in Slovakia, who I kept pestering for probably about 6 or 7 years to remake these tubes. And the tubes for that particular unit were the VCAs. So without it, I didn't have a piece of gear. Yeah. The whole thing was just like, well, it's a bit of a boat anchor, really. So I borrowed the money off my parents to go to the show, and pretty much for the whole rebuild of this product. And I got to San Francisco. I got to the AES show, and because the AES show flips from New York to or at least it did back then, from the sort of alternately flips from New York to San Francisco and then back to New York again. So this time it was in New York, and I remember my first visit there, and my booth number was 440, and I thought, this is a good omen, actually. This is really, really good. How can this possibly go wrong, with a number like that, So I'd taken a unit that sounded like a Fairchild, looked like a Fairchild, had as many parts in it as an original Fairchild, and that to me was the third bit, was the key bit, because there are a lot of these units around, and they all sound great, and I know they all do sound really, really good, and they're brilliant and everything. But this unit is to my knowledge, the only unit that is built in exactly the same way as the original units. So I took this unit to the show, again with no expectation of how it might be, or how it might be received. And there were loads of manufacturers coming up to me going, "Oh wow, how did you get the tubes made and everything?" And it was like that my little sort of corner of the show was kind of besieged by all these huge heavyweight, manufacturers like Manley and so on. And it was like, me, I didn't even have any music to play through it. I was playing CDs through it.
My God.
Yeah, which is not a great thing to be playing, mastered stuff that is already, has already been squashed. And I think I took some drum and bass and stuff like that to kind of, try and highlight it a little bit, because I knew how it worked, So, but that's all I had. So I didn't have anything dynamic to put through it.
So, I mean, that's amazing to kind of hear the interest that you got in your kind of first product. And I'm assuming that was then the formal start of Analoguetube. Yeah. And if you could kind of tell me what Analoguetube is now and what it is that you kind of work on.
So roll forward 17 years, something like that. I can't believe it's that long. Wow. But I've got a couple of mic pre's out now. I've got a guitar pedal called the Love Bomb out now with I went into partnership with a friend of mine who actually by chance has a private studio at Metropolis, and it took years to develop this thing, but it's basically a guitar head, a guitar amp, but just the head and no speaker or anything like that, so it just emulates everything a guitar amp should be, but just as a preamp.
Nice.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So, but for myself, Analoguetube still has the two compressors running, and now 2 amazing sounding mic pre's, tube mic pre's, which has various reviews and bits and pieces out, which is really, really great. So, and I'll be taking them to NAMM next year in January to do.
Awesome. So you are like the go-to kind of tube compressor guy.
I mean, perhaps compressors, but I don't really know how. I've sort of found myself in the mic it's a very, very busy world, mic preamps. It's a highly competitive world, and there are many, many mic preamps on the market at the moment. I think the sort of the luxury end of the market is still there.
Yeah.
I very much make all my own gear, and so these things take 100 hours to make. So I rebuilt a unit for a guy in New York last year actually, which he bought third hand from someone, I forget who now, but that was made in 2010, something like that. So he bought it and then shipped it over to me, and he said, I want the front. He wanted it customized. So I did that, and it looks absolutely spectacular. And he wanted the whole unit sort of built up as a kind of a current model, because I've added little bits and pieces over the years to various, which are now sort of standard features on these units. So that's really, really interesting. So they're not going away.
And you're doing
unfortunately.
Well, so you're doing all of that out of your space here at Dean Street.
So I do all of that. I've had various places over the years, various workshops over the years. So in 2019, when I left Metropolis, sadly, I was given an opportunity by Jazz actually to come and work here, and I was so delighted to be here, to be given a space here to work out of. I mean, what's not to like about this studio and being in the middle of Soho? I mean, it's an absolutely it's a dream, isn't it? Really. So I'm absolutely delighted about that. I guess
it's got its own kind of unique history in terms of music production. So it's kind of almost got that.
It's absolutely. I mean, you've
synergy.
seen all the writing on the walls, from when you come down, and it's an extraordinary studio, really. I think it's one of those sort of places where you can sort of just walk past it and not notice it.
It's got that kind of like ultimate hidden gem thing where you've got all those people outside that have no idea what's happening almost below their feet.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here. It's kind of a boy's dream, really, to be able to operate out of here.
You're obviously in such a particular part of music production with the tech side, which is one of the most important parts because everyone's got to use it. But what is it about kind of that kind of technical side that really you love that has really kind of kept you going? Like you said, you've got to
I think I like to see the kind of when people use a piece of gear that they don't necessarily even know how to use properly. They might not know how to use it, and that's fine, but their reaction to something and say, that sounds really amazing, my voice sounds amazing, this track sounds incredible, how does it sound like that, why does it sound like that? You don't need to go through the whole sort of gamut of how it's been recorded. It's just enough to know that what's been put down on tape makes them sound absolutely fantastic, or the band great, or and I love just working with people, actually. So and there's been a lot of them over the years.
And what would be your kind of key piece of advice for people that are interested, but don't know where to start, and just generally kind of getting into the music scene?
It is quite a difficult. I mean, the obvious answer is don't stop. Just pursue your dream. And there'll be lots of pushback, but my sort of key takeaway would be to just keep doggedly pursuing it, and eventually you will get there. It has to, and it will. And I'm always really curious about why. I'm not surprised, actually. I say curious. I'm not really surprised at all, but I'm interested why so many students and so many young people are not quite sort of understanding where the hardware sort of side of things fits in. Where does a compressor fit in the chain? Where does an EQ fit in, and how in a traditional sense, where these bits of gear fit into the recording sort of chain of your music. Because, I guess for a young person just starting out, they've got everything on a computer screen and they can put anything wherever they want to do or wherever they want to put it. But there is a right way. Well, actually, there are no wrong ways in music. Let's just say that. But a sort of a typical way might be to have certain elements of your recording chain in a sort of a typical format, But all of that sometimes seems to be lost, with the advent of software.
I'm really intrigued. So, what would you say would be kind of the typical format that you'd think something should be put together in that you're seeing maybe isn't happening now?
Right. Well, so this is there are no wrong answers here, but like lots of people say, you should have the EQ before the compressor. A lot of people say you should have the compressor before the EQ, but there are certain things that you can achieve by having the compressor first and the EQ afterwards. So let's just say, for example, take Amy Winehouse and her song Valerie. Now that was a lot of music and a great piece of music, but it was her voice that kind of really sort of was front and center of the record, as all records should be. The vocals should be up there. It should really jump out at you. If you listen to a lot of 50s and 60s records, the kind of the vocal is right in front of your face, and the band is sort of slightly back and behind the vocal. And so, the way that was achieved was to maybe have the compressor first, and in particular Fairchild, where the sort of the middle portion of the audio is dipped down a bit, but as soon as it goes back up the board again, you can EQ the mid-range back up again, and that's what gives you your kind of mid-vocal sort of thing right in front of your face there, and it gives it that kind of real sort of screaming kind of here I am, that effect. So, but other people say, well, you should have other bits of gear round other ways, and it's there, as I say, there are no wrong or right ways. I don't think.
So, because I mean, as well, now you have a lot of people who they're technically minded, I think, but there is a limited access to things. And whereas you've got now the internet, which is kind of the great equalizer, you have access to so much more stuff. Yeah. And you have the kind of the digital version of things. So you have the kind of the plugins where the kind of like the sound mimicking.
I'm going through this crisis at the moment. Actually, it's
like, are they? My thing is always like, is it actually? Does it get close at all? Really, or is it just like a bit like putting grain on a photograph where you're trying to mimic film?
This is a. I was going to say this is a question for the pub.
Oh, really? Rather than the podcast.
But we'll go there.
Okay.
We'll go there. We'll go there. So yeah, I don't have a particular gripe about it. In fact, I love plugins. I think it's absolutely fantastic that what technology has taken us to a place where we can literally just sort of soft touch a screen and we have in my case, a compressor or a mic pre or guitar preamp or something like that. Absolutely fantastic. I think it's great. But I think with certain technologies that plugins emulate is quite difficult. because of the sort of the well, let's take sort of tube equipment for example. It's never right when you switch it on, and it's never right again when you switch it back on. And whenever you switch this gear back on again, it's always slightly kind of, you can never really put your kind of finger on it. And that's the beauty of valve gear. It adds a kind of randomness to your to the processing of music, which is something very difficult for AI and plug-in manufacturers to emulate. The behavior of the electronics is so random and inconsistent that it just makes it impossible to capture.
Yeah, it's almost like a more human machine.
Yeah, right.
In that, the way that like loops were started because no one could ever do a vocal that exact over and over again.
I mean, you can get pretty close to it. Don't get me wrong. You can get super close to it. But people have emulated Fairchild, for example, and they've taken one person's Fairchild, and another manufacturer has tried to emulate another Fairchild, and they're completely different. So the only consistency is that they're different, that they're not actually consistent to the performance or the way they should actually naturally perform. You can get close to it, and it's great, but is it like the real thing? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think the jury's out on that.
I guess it's almost a different. It's in its own way, its own sound.
Yes. Yeah.
So it almost becomes it's that element of synths sound like synths.
Yeah.
They're not. So I mean, they are done emulating, say, a guitar or a keyboard, etc.
Yeah.
But they're almost, it's got its own sound to sound like that. So it almost then that plug-in sound is that version of that Fairchild.
That's right.
Say,
I mean, for solid state gear, like stuff that's sort of made with transistors and discrete bits of audio equipment that are not valve, then you can do that. That's okay. But I think for valve gear, that's a whole another level of sort of difficulty. I think, I don't know. Maybe one day they will. And
then I've got one last one just on my side of things, just because has there ever been a track that you've listened to where you've just listened to it and you thought, oh my god, that sounds amazing? Like maybe even if it's not your like taste of music, it's just like you just love the sound that they've been able to make.
Well, you've got me on the spot there.
Yeah, I know. I kind of haven't let you prep on that one.
Oh my goodness me! You've
I've stumped you.
I do like. I mean, I'm going to say yes. I do like a lot of music, of course. I love the way vinyl sounds. I even with all its scratches and its pops and crackles and stuff, I really love that. I love the tone of it. I love the sound of it. I love the non-linearity of music. I mean, there are certain record labels like ECM that have got artists on that are known for their recordings in particular. Chick Corea, for instance, who and I know ECM released a lot of stuff by him, and all the recordings are absolutely impeccable. You could listen to me, think that's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, it's a bit of a difficult question.
No, I know. I kind of stumped you. I'm sorry. But I was intrigued, and I thought
hasn't come across very well, that has it? So I have no idea. I don't know. I've no idea. So, yeah.
Anyway, it's been amazing to have you on and to chat to you. I've learnt so much, and now I'm going to read up a ton as well. And thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. For more conversations with artists, producers, and the amazing people here at Dean Street, don't forget to follow and subscribe. And if you want to know anything else about the incredible things that the team do here, don't forget to check out the Dean Street website. Hope to see you on the next one.